Good evening, everyone, and welcome all of you in today's session. This webinar is organized by Internal Audit Standard Board of ICAI and is hosted by Amritsar branch NIRC of ICAI. Also, before we proceed, I would like to thank all our esteemed members for sparing their valuable time for this webinar. The idea of this webinar is to discuss how technology acts as an enabler of internal audit. And I promise, friends, this is going to be a very exciting and interesting webinar. Without taking much of your time, let me welcome our members and also our first speaker, Prashant, CA Prashant, to throw some light on today the topic embracing technology during internal audit and meeting stakeholders' expectation. Before proceeding, let me give us some background of Prashant. He has over 15 years of experience in internal auditing, and his areas of specialization include statutory audit, risk-based internal audit, process reviews, due diligence reviews, IFRS, and NDAS. So I invite CA Prashant for providing his valuable insights on the topic. Yes, Prashant.
Yeah, thank you, Shubham. Very good evening to all the members who are present.
Sir, before that, branch chairman is there for welcome address.
Sorry.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sorry, sir.
Sorry, Prashant ji.
No
I will not take much of your time.
No, sir.
In absentia, our respected Central Council member, CA Charanjit Singh Nanda ji. In absentia, our Central Council member, CA Anil S. Bhandari ji. Our technical guest speaker for the technical section, CA Prashant ji, CA Amit Jaiswal ji, and Shri VGVS Sharma ji. My senior members from the profession, ladies and gentlemen and friends, a very good evening to all. I heartily welcome to all on this virtual webinar, which is organized by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and under the chairmanship of our Central Council member C.A. Charanjit Singh Nanda ji, and it was hosted by the Amritsar branch. And Internal Audit Standard Board of the ICAI is organizing this webinar. And the topic is very interesting one because we are moving because of this COVID. We almost all the CAs and even multinational business houses are moving towards the technology. We are sitting in our house and various employees are working as a work from home. Not only in the internal audit, but I think in all the aspects, this technology is giving boost, I can say, and especially this COVID has generated a new avenue for the various members also. Members, I am pleased to inform you that our Amritsar branch got first prize at the national level on the 4th of this February and got an award from our respected state finance minister and our president. And we also got second prize in the student category at the national level. And regarding today's topic, there are speakers from the STL technology, from CIPLA, and I think this seminar and webinar will be a very worthwhile to listen because these are such a big companies. HCL is also a part of this webinar, and definitely we are going to gain knowledgeable section from these speakers. So I will not take touch. Now I thank you very much. Now I request our CA Prashant ji to kindly start your deliberation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. As I said earlier, very good evening to all the members who are present here for this session. And as Chairman sir very rightly said, that technology is going to be the key in whatever we do, and more so in internal audit, because there are a lot of developments which are happening, and where we used to do the internal audit, there are a lot of changes. So now I just share the slides, and then we can go through the slides one by one, and we can deliberate. And obviously the question answer session, Shubham, how are we doing the Q&A? Is it at the end, or what is your plan on Q&A?
Yeah, so that will be in the end. From 8:30 to 8:50, we will take the Q&A session.
Fine. Yeah. So any questions? I think you can put it in the chat box. I think that is the process which is normally followed. Yeah. I will just share the screen and start the presentation. Yeah. Is the screen visible, Shubham?
Yes, it is visible.
Yeah, great. Yeah. So basically, as I said earlier, the technology has a very big role to play in internal audit. And to just understand that, we will go one step back to see how internal audit has evolved. What are today's expectations? What are the modern technologies which are getting used in internal audit? And there is a myth that technologies can be used only by very big companies or very big auditors. How can the SME sector play a role, or what are the technologies which are suitable to them? How can they leverage on that part? That is something we will cover. What are the skills which are required for an internal auditor to deploy technology? Do we need to be a software engineer? Answer is definitely no, but we will come to that part also. Obviously, the summarization of the entire presentation, and then the Q&A which is there, which Shubham has already said as the end of the session. So we have typically around 45 to 50 minutes which is allotted, and we'll try to cover. And what I will try to do is, with each of these slides, try to share some of the personal experiences which we have during the course of my auditing experience, where we have seen the benefits of the technology or the issues that we face because of lack of knowledge of technology. So today, loans are getting sanctioned by robots. I have a client where the loans are processed by a robot. The artificial intelligence is used for processing of loans. And these are obviously small ticket loans. Now, if you do an internal audit of such an organization in a conventional manner, what will you find out? And how many vouchers are you going to check? How many loan applications will you check? So in a typical NBFC, the loan sanctioning process, the loan disbursal process is something that you check very thoroughly, KYC and all those things. Everything here is done through a platform, app-based, everything online. What will you check? So when we started doing the internal audit of such an organization, we realized that if we follow a conventional method of doing an audit, your outcome is not going to be what is expected by the board of directors, because obviously the mindset was very forward looking of the promoters, of the directors, and very fast growing organization. And in today's world, we know the fintechs, how fast they are growing, and the aspirations are very, very high. So in that case, if you are not able to use the modern technologies, if you are not able to do a data mining, then your internal audit will definitely fall short of expectations. Insurance companies, there are cases where the claims are getting processed by artificial intelligence through machines, where human intervention is very minimum. Only in cases where the machine is not able to get a result, human intervention is there, or certain cases are marked for human intervention where it is a questionable thing. Use of chatbots in real-time data in business, that is something a big challenge, and it's a today's reality. Complete transactions being done through mobile apps, banking applications, business applications which are mobile app driven. And in these situations, because of the environment that we are living in, if you do a complete only a paper audit or only a audit through review of the data separately, your outcome is not going to be satisfactory, and there will definitely be a gap of expectations. And the gap of expectation is not because you do not put enough effort, but the risk are somewhere different as compared to the conventional risk, and our audit focus is on the wrong area. So this is the context in which why the topic is very, very relevant today. When we look at how internal audit has evolved over a period of time, it was a transaction audit earlier, or a concurrent audit as a concept in bank is very famous, or still many banks still relevant, that you check each and every voucher, you check each and every payment. But in today's volume, whether it is humanly possible to do it, not possible to do it, or whether you are able to really deliver that quality or not, or give that level of assurance, is a question mark. From transaction audit, people move to a process-oriented audit, where you look at the process, you look at what are the process gaps, what controls have to be plugged in to ensure that the process gaps are mitigated. But then the expectations rose to risk management. So people are asking, what are my risk management issues which auditor should highlight? That is the expectation of the audit committee. That is the expectation of the shareholders. That is the expectation of the board. That then people started talking about cyber security. People started talking about fraud risk assessment, risk of double payments, revenue leakage risk. All those risk management issues, or insurance, become a very good focus area. So these are the another expectation where it was evolved. Now the buzzword is about automation and digitization. Last 2 years of COVID, the buzz around this is significantly greater, and hence the landscape is completely changing. And as internal auditors, if we haven't moved along with the times, things could get difficult for us, because the expectations and the risk which are there are changing very, very quickly. There is definitely a need to change the way and the method in which we approach an internal audit assignment. Be it that in-house internal audit of a company, so there could be an in-house internal audit team, or you could be doing as an external internal auditor, but your approach will have to change, because the complexity of the business is changing. The level of compliances is very, very high. So today, if you have to give an assurance that company has complied with all laws, which is a typical compliance certificate, which is given by the company secretary or the CFO to the board. How do you really, verify those type of things? Because the number of laws which are applicable, the number of compliances which are required to be done are humongous. This is one area where a lot of softwares are getting implemented, a lot of software solutions are being implemented, so that the comfort around the compliances can be of a greater degree. The approach is not an accounting related audit. You need to look at the business. The depth which is expected out of the internal audit assignment is significantly greater. And I will give you an example. I made an observation that last year certain revenues were wrongly recognized. It should not have been recognized, because the obligations were not fulfilled, and because obligations did not get fulfilled, the client did not pay the money, and you have to write it off in the current year. Now the question which was asked is that if the revenue was wrongly recognized, what happened to the incentive which was paid to the salesperson, or the performance incentive which was paid to the employees? Was that also reversed? Now, if you see, the connection which is being taken is that you need to not, yes, you identified a good observation that yes, there was an error in accounting or a wrong recognition of a revenue. But if that question is asked to you in terms of what happened to the other aspects, and if you are not aware about it, you fall short of the deliverable. The expectation of the board or the audit committee is to understand whether the technology that you are going to use, what technology you are going to use. Is it going to be a manual audit? Is it going to be an audit software? Is it Excel going to be the core based on which you will do your audit? That is something which people really want to understand. The environment is very, very competitive. The cost of internal audit obviously is an issue, where if you are able to quote a certain amount of fees, you obviously there is a competition where somebody may quote lower or may quote higher, or may take a differential advantage of various other things. So it's a very competitive environment. Or the businesses are definitely looking at cost as a factor. At the same point of time, the expectations are increasing, and hence the use of technology to optimize the time resources is something of a must. In case I have been fast or slow, please message, or if I need to change something. The risk which is there now is changing. People are looking at different type of risk in internal audit. People are looking at cyber security, environmental, regulatory, fraud, governance, vendor management. Vendor management is another area where there is a lot of focus in terms of whether the price discovery mechanism is correct, not correct. And your technology can be of a great use, whether the KYC of the vendors has been done, not done, whether any duplicate payments are happening to the vendors. This is one area where there is a lot of focus and a tremendous deployment of technology. Some of the examples I have in the subsequent slides, where in vendor management you can do a lot of things with the use of technology, and also at the same point of time save some time. Crisis management, culture, these are the risks which people are looking at right now. So the expectations are changing, hence the approach needs to change, and it has to be more current, technology friendly, and business related. The key expectation of all the stakeholders today is that we do not want you to do a post-mortem. We want preventive controls. We want value addition. We want cost optimization. We want fraud risk, automation, and anticipation of risk. So it is moved from oversight to foresight. The internal auditors are expected to give foresight also, in addition to insight. So that is the journey that we have to move. There are various tools in terms of data mining, in terms of artificial intelligence, which can help the internal auditors to expand their horizon and think in this manner. So the common technique or a thread which is there, you need to standardize some of the audit steps, use technology to do those standard audit steps, and use your time, which is very, very precious, in areas which will really add value and in thinking, rather than doing the mundane task or the routine activities. So this is one type of a strategy which can be deployed to make the internal audit very, very effective. All these standard areas to be done with the help of a technology, either through a macro or various other Excel functions, or through an audit software, where all your standard steps can be done through a very, very, very short period of time, and you use your own time or the senior people time in giving the foresight, looking at things from a different angle, brainstorming, thinking. So this is how, if we are able to optimize the time, use technology, maybe we will be able to add more value and be more relevant to the business. So this is something which I have spoken about maybe in the earlier slide. Some of it is a repetition, but one of the key thing here is the 100% verification and the 360-degree approach is something that is a very, very crucial thing that we need to understand in today's times. The expectation of the management, especially during the last 2 years of COVID, is that online payments have happened. You please check whether there is no double payment, whether the account numbers are correct, whether the online payments have gone to the correct account, whether there are IT controls. So you check 100%. Or there are discounts given to customers, there are credit notes which are given to customers, you please check 100%. Now, if you have to do 100% checking in a large organization, it is very costly. Here, you will have to deploy the technology in the right manner to ensure that with the help of technology, you are able to achieve the same result and give the same level of comfort to the management. If you are able to do that, there are a lot of business opportunities which are available today. And another area which I need to really focus on is the 360-degree approach, which I said by way of an example earlier, that if there is a sales which is to be reversed, whether you looked at performance bonus, whether you looked at any other angle, whether you looked at preventive controls, whether you looked at my strengthening of checklist, whether the implementation of that has happened or not happened. So they are wanting you to think like a businessman and think at a 360-degree level and come up with a composite solution. One of the things that I have heard many times is that everybody can make suggestions. Everybody can give that ye karna chahiye, wo karna chahiye, but are you capable of supporting the management of implementing? That is another very key area, and technology is something that can really help you in these areas. Implementation support can be done through technology. You can have the dashboards of implementation, frequent automated updates. In case there are deviations, you have an automatic SMS, auto emailers. A lot of things can be facilitated if you are able to set up the right processes through the use of technology. We will now look at some of the modern technologies and how a technology can be deployed in an organization. Either the in-house internal audit team can use it, or as an external internal audit consultant. How do you use that? The planning stage is something where the technology can be deployed very, very beautifully. So take an example where you have somebody like a Domino's or somebody like an retail outlet with multiple locations. How do you know which of my locations is my riskier location, where I need to do more audit, where I need to do less audit, where should the focus be? The technology can be deployed in a very effective manner to give you a good risk profiling in terms of which of my locations I need to focus on. Within that locations, what areas should I focus on? Because if you have defined the standard parameters, standard performance criteria, those will definitely help you in identifying what are the gray areas and which of the locations or the branches could be audited first, because the resources are always going to be limited. This is a good method to do that selection. There are a lot of other areas where you could do the risk profiling. You can do the sampling, statistical sampling very scientifically through the software. Benford's laws can be used to do the sampling through a software where your strike rate in terms of the picking the correct sample could be greater, and if your sampling is correct, your output could be more accurate or more correct. Stimulation of test data, so whether the functions are operating effectively, not effectively, the inherent controls, you can do a test data stimulation. This can help you in identifying the weak areas where more focus should be done, or a proper risk assessment. This is so planning becomes very critical. The technology used there, controls which need to be continuously monitored. This is something of a buzzword again today, continuous control monitoring, where people are saying that audit once in a 6-month audit, once in a year audit today may not be sufficient for me. I need to do a continuous control monitoring. And some of the very examples, maybe these are banking examples, but or even in a manufacturing industry, those examples are very, very prevalent. If my rejections during the day exceed my standard percentage which I have defined, I need to monitor it today. I cannot wait till the month end to see, whether what is happening, and because till the time you would have really incurred a lot of losses. So if those controls can be monitored on a daily basis, so wastage could be one area, your sales returns could be one area, credit limits could be another area. These are the areas where the software can automatically monitor a lot of controls and what are the deviations, and those deviations go to a proper channel for their approval, for their correct authority, and at that point of time immediate attention is given to those areas. So here softwares play a very, very large role. Even the simpler softwares, Tally may also have some of the functions. If you can customize some of those functions even in Tally, you may be able to get something out of it. SAP obviously has a lot more in-depth functions, where if you are able to use some of the modules correctly and develop those reports, it can really do wonders. Initially, though, it becomes a little painful task. So this can be done from both the perspectives, from a company's angle and from an auditor's angle, when you are supporting the company develop some of these systems, because these are long-term systems, and if you are able to demonstrate that you are able to implement some of the solutions for the company, your role becomes much larger. You become like an advisor or a philosopher to the management, where they bounce off that I am launching a new product, what internal controls should I put, what software controls should I put, or I'm implementing a new software, what do I do? Your role comes there quite significantly. Reporting is also one area where softwares can be used, because in a typical audit assignment, we have seen that if the field work takes 2 to 3 weeks, the team is preparing the report for 1 week or more. Because today's the expectations of the reports are also rising. You need the root cause, you need the implications, you need the management responses. So in case of some of the standard items, the software can be a good way where it can support drafting of the reports, some customization or standardization of the exhibits, annexures, the formatting, the fonts. A lot of small things can be taken care by the technology where you really need not worry about it. Root cause investigation could be one area where software could be used in much more detail. So when you're looking at a large database, you can look at the trend analysis in terms of, what is the reason why it is happening? Is it a particular time? Is it an age group, or a particular set of a product? Various other tests can be run to know what is really the root cause of it. So these are the areas where technology can be very, very easily deployed. A lot of softwares, a lot of tools are available today, which we need to understand and see how we can use them. Some of the examples I have given in my slides. But before we go into how do you deploy some of them, we need to understand what are the buzzwords today which are there. Artificial intelligence is something which is very prominent. I started my presentation with that, but we need to understand a little bit more on artificial intelligence. Process mining, RPA, as it is called, robotic process automation, and advanced analytics. These are the 4 buzzwords which are there in the internal audit, which is there, which we need to really very clearly understand how do we use it for our benefit. Because it is quite possible, and there is always an argument that the technology may make internal auditor redundant, or whether it will really be relevant because robots can do some of the audit steps. Yes, as I said earlier, if we use them strategically, they can do some of the repetitive steps, but the thinking part of it, the foresight which is there, the wisdom which is there, that can come from the human only. And that is where the focus, time, and attention should be there. Artificial intelligence definition, we understand the computer itself is made more and more intelligent. So today you see examples which are commonly used, that if you search for some product in one app, automatically it is deployed at various other things, that their advertisements are directed to you. That is something called artificial intelligence, also has a role to play there. Artificial intelligence, it keeps on improving itself. That is a very unique feature about it. It keeps on improving itself. The system algorithm continuously improves itself. We have used it, Siri. We use the lot of apps which are there. They are based on artificial intelligence. We are using it on a day-to-day basis today also. But as internal auditors, what do we do? Because your clients may deploy artificial intelligence. Do we understand it enough? Do we understand where could be the potential control weaknesses? Where could there be leakages? So those are the areas where we need to go in depth and understand. Do an audit of the software platform, maybe use specialist in some of the areas to get the desired output out of it. Because as I said earlier, we are chartered accountants and we are not software engineers. But at the same point of time, if we identify that here the artificial intelligence plays a key role and we have a basic understanding about it, either we collaborate with some specialist, or at least we are aware that this is one area where I will need an external help, or I need to research a little bit more further, or I need to do a deeper study in terms of what are the potential risks. Because the risk and the threats which are going to come, because yes, they may do their jobs perfectly, but the risk threats could be elsewhere. It could be more cyber related, it could be more IT related, and hence our skill sets also have to be designed to address those type of risks. This is very interesting. Process mining is that we do a process study in terms of if you do a very simple example, if there is a voucher, it has to be prepared by an accountant. It goes to a approval of the chief accountant, and above certain limit, it may go to the CFO or the other authority matrix as it is defined. The process mining automatically is able to map what process was followed in terms of approval of this accounting entry, voucher, or this transaction through the log records which are developed in the operating system. And based on that, you will be able to know that this voucher traveled at this location, it went to him, it got approved in 2 days, it got approved in 5 days. It was lying on his desk for such a long period of time. So if there are process gaps in terms of turnaround time, in terms of responses, in terms of pendencies, delinquencies, you will obviously make a very detailed analysis out of that, and those gaps can be plugged in and improved upon once we do the root cause analysis of why it has happened and what are the issues. Robotic process automation is something which is a buzzword right now. A lot of companies are implementing, and I am not talking about very, very large companies, but even medium to large companies are looking at these options where you can automate certain processes because they are cost effective. They can work 24/7. Some of the common areas where it is getting implemented is accounts receivable, account payable. It could be payroll processing, or it could be your bank reconciliation which is being prepared. So I have seen an example where if the bank reconciliation has to be prepared, the robot extract the bank statement either from their email, and then they map it with the process which is followed in SAP, that they map the bank statement with the SAP entries and come out with the open items, and those are shared for the human intervention where if there are any open items which they need to look at it. Another use of technology which I have seen used very beautifully in pharma companies, there are YouTube videos which are available, is use of drones where physical verification is conducted through drones, and the barcodes are scanned or RFID tags are scanned by the drones, and then the report, it gets linked directly to the SAP system, and you get the excess shortage differences automatically. So in cases where there are large warehouses and where 100% physical verification is to be done, imagine use of a drone and how effectively it can be done. What is the time saving it is there, because you may need 3 or 4 people for 2-3 days to do this entire exercise, but with the use of a drone maybe it can be done in matter of hours, and the accuracy level could be very, very significantly better. And the reconciliation process is automatic because you do not need to upload any statement, you do not need to type in any data. It is just integrated, and you get the report in terms of what are the gaps, what are the differences, and then you need to address those issues. That is a very beautiful process. If somebody is interested, you can look at YouTube videos of this process which is there. Large godowns or large warehouses are typically using such type of processes today. So if as an internal auditor, if you are not aware that these are the processes which I can deploy to make my assignment more effective, or if I am working as an internal auditor in a large company, can I try to implement some of these processes which are cost effective, which are suitable to me? We need to be aware about these options and use them wisely. It is not possible that everything can be done with a robot or everything can be done with a drone. But if you're aware about the opportunities which are there, you can really identify that, yes, I can do it here. This is something which I may not be able to do it immediately, maybe at a later point in time. So those are the judgments and the decisions that you can definitely take. This is something which a lot of companies are looking at, where they use the internal auditors to help them set up the advanced analytics in terms of how the data is behaving, what are the consumer patterns, what is the pattern in the data, is there some trend, is there something which the data wants to talk to us and we are not able to recognize. Because the data, if you speak to anybody who has been in internal audit profession for a very long time, they have said that this data, once I organize it in a certain manner, it talks to me. It gives me something which is not very apparent easily, but we get something out of it. So if you are able to organize the data in a proper manner, you will be able to see something which in a normal course you will not be able to see, either a trend or a pattern or something else. A lot of softwares which are available today, which installed in your ERP system or integrated with the ERP system, they can give you a good insight about how the data is behaving. Is there a trend of increase in price? Are some of the vendors rejection ratios increasing? Is your wastage increasing, decreasing? What is the trend? What is the pattern? Those very intelligent insights can be given, and the internal auditor can play a very important role in terms of identifying which areas it has to be implemented, what should be my parameters, how should be implemented, and how should those reports be reviewed, whether the action plan is there, not there. There's a lot of areas around it where internal auditor can be useful if they are able to understand which are the tools, how they are functioning, and how effectively we can use them. Because this is a common question which is asked here. These are all technologies. What will internal auditor do here? The internal auditor has a very big role because we understand systems, we understand processes, we understand the leakages where it is possible, we understand the business quite clearly. The software person do not have this skill sets, and that is why we can supplement it, where we be a bridge in terms of these are the areas where we can use the technology. This is the process in which we set up the technology. It's like a project management that we can help them. As I said earlier, identify potential areas, because you will have to look at which areas automation is possible, where it is not possible, what should be done, what should not be done. You can act as a very good advisor in terms of where technology should be deployed, where it is more effective. Another area where internal auditor can play a very critical role is, for example, if a process is automated, a robot is going to be used or a bot is set up, what steps will a robot follow? Because it is like garbage in, garbage out. So if the right steps are defined, right controls are defined, the robot or the bot will follow the process which is defined, and internal auditor can ensure that the process which is defined is foolproof, it is vetted correctly, there are no apparent gaps which are there. So that is something where a very critical role can be played. The output out of that, whether it is desired as per desired standards, not as per desired standards, whether there are issues, that can be another area of audit. And defining the standards and the parameters. One of the expectation of the management is what are the industry practices, what are the industry benchmarks, because as an auditor you have an exposure to multiple industries, best practices, and you need to bring them to use. So this is another way where you can marry your process experience with understanding of the technology and using of the software engineers. Some of the examples which are very commonly there, which we are doing it also on a day-to-day basis: predefined reports. So PO with our PR, three-way matching. These are some of the predefined reports that are there. And if there is a deviation, there is an automatic pop-up or a dashboard of such deviations. So what happens is, this is one of the standard step or a standard audit process, that whether there is any PO without a PR. Now, if the system itself is defined in such a manner that either there is a restriction or there is a possibility that you lift the restriction with approval, but you can get an exception report and the deviations are through a system only. So what happens is that some of the standard areas you put less time and effort and focus on the more critical high risk areas. Exceptional reporting automation is in terms of either where the credit limit has got breached or credit exposure has got breached. Automatically you get an SMS or to the CEO or the MD that this is a new event which is happening, or there are high sales returns where the minimum threshold or the standard has got breached. There is an unusual event which has happened today, you get a breach, or there is a large payment which is made. There is an automated alert that this is a large payment which has been made. So somebody can just look at it that this is something which is approved, authorized. So it acts as a double check sometimes. Banks are using it very, very extensively. So if there are unusual credit card transactions or unusual transactions in the bank account, either there are calls which come, automated calls used through technology, that something has happened, I'll press 1 that if you have done it, press 2 if you have not done it. So those areas which are being used, so it helps in terms of potential frauds which could happen, maybe stop that at an early stage. Sampling is one area where technology is used very drastically, and or identification of high risk areas. Automation and the dashboard is another area where through dashboards we can have a bird's eye view of lot of things in terms of what are the total controls, how many are functioning, how many are not functioning, is there been a breach. Those type of a dashboard is something which can be very useful, or a dashboard or an MIS out of the if I'm looking at sales, and if a dashboard is there where I know my daily sales, I know the product wise sales or the location wise sales in a very summarized crisp manner, through a use of a dashboard on a periodic basis, because this does not need a lot of time and effort. This can get updated automatically if you just put the right files in the right format, in the right folders. The dashboards get automatically updated. These are some of the suggestions that you can also give to your internal audit clients. For example, one suggestion which you can definitely give is to use a debtors dashboard, where if a dashboard is created and the files which are there, if we are saved in the same file, there is a slicer function in Excel which can be used to create some of these dashboards, and they are very effective from a visual point of view for the senior management also, or the middle level management. Now, this is one example of a dashboard which is created in Excel, and this can get updated on a daily basis. So imagine that if you have suggested this type of a format to a CFO, and if he looks at it, that this is at a glance he is able to look at a lot of data in terms of the sales, the GST collection, and there are the functions which are there, if you see, in terms of either sort, filter, which are available, where you can look at it in a different manner. The graphs get automatically updated. So this is something which can be very, very useful. The internal audit can be very, very useful. The technology can be used to manage the internal audit assignments. Even in statutory audit, larger firms use audit softwares. In large companies are also using internal audit softwares to manage the entire internal audit function. So be it planning, be it monitoring, working papers, report, implementation trackers. There are softwares which are available. Specialized softwares, customized, can be made by the software people, or there are off-the-shelf softwares also which are available, which may be at a basic level today, but at least in terms of the entire internal audit process, whether it was followed correctly, not correctly, you can do it completely automated. It can be quite useful, especially on two areas. One is your planning. Secondly, on the work paper management and the tracking of observations and the reporting. These are 3 or 4 areas where it can be really very, very useful. Some of the benefits I have already covered earlier in terms of why you should use technology. I mean, this is a no-brainer. Reduction in cost is something which is very, very critical today, because as the salaries and the remuneration of the chartered accountants increase, the costs of performing an audit increases, and there are competitions and there are cost pressure in the organization as well. Because one of the fear which was there, that if there is a COVID, we'll not be the first person to suffer, that latest management is doing it hands-on, why do you need an audit? But if you are able to deliver at an effective cost, if you are able to do it at the right price, there are a lot of opportunities. So hence the technology will be of very, very critical importance to reduce the cost. The resources are very scarce. So one of the challenges which is there is obviously the resources. I mean, this is something which everybody sitting or attending this seminar is aware about, the scarcity of resources, the challenges which we are there. The only way out, obviously, is to do some things differently. And as I said earlier, focusing on different areas where the routine task, it's not going to happen that I do not need to provide assurance on the statutory compliances, or I need not do the routine areas. But if the routine areas I am able to do in a more effective manner, I can do high value added items as well. So that is something which where technology can be a very good tool. As I said earlier, the myth is that the technology is only for very, very large enterprises, and the smaller companies or the smaller chartered accountants can't use technology and it's too costly. But Microsoft Excel per se is a very effective tool. If you're able to use Microsoft Excel in detail, in full depth, it does a lot of functions. You can have the duplicates, you can have the missing serial controls, you can have the dashboards which are there through which I demonstrated through Microsoft Excel. There are a lot of functions. Power BI is one of the function which is good reporting tool. MIS tool. Slicer is another function which is there. So when somebody looks at the Microsoft Excel part of it, these are some of the high-end functions of Microsoft Excel which definitely should be explored. Macros is another area where a lot of things can be, repetitive things can be standardized. IDEA is another platform which is available to standardize a lot of audit steps. It gives a good trail of documentation in terms of what are the functions performed, and can be useful even if there is a regulator or a peer review of the internal audit function. Some of these steps can be demonstrated through IDEA, that because it creates a log, a complete log. And there are a lot of standardized functions where with a click of a button, you will get a lot of data analysis. Tableau is a presentation software where, it organizes the data in a very beautiful manner, where you can look at the trends, analysis, and all those things. It is something which is where for MIS reporting or creating dashboards, it is very, very useful function. So some of the examples which I have already spoken earlier, but maybe just quickly run through, is Slicer, which is useful. Pivot table is very useful. As I said, data talks. And if it is organized in a correct manner, it gives a lot of insight, because there could be a lot of information, but we need to convert that information into something more meaningful and something from which we can take out some sense, make some sense, and derive and take it to a logical conclusion. With the increasing data points where the information is being gathered today, if you are able to rightly look at some of the trends, patterns, a lot of potential threats can be identified, a lot of potential frauds can be identified through scanning of the data, and the technology will play a tremendous role here. Macros and VLOOKUP are another areas which are very useful. So use of Excel, training in Excel is something which is a must. We should do it even at all the SME firm level, or even at a smaller size, or maybe even at a larger size, because Excel has a lot of capabilities, and for a company of 500 crore, 1000 crore size, I think Excel can be used, though it may have one or two areas where some few limitations are there, but it can still be used on a substantial level. We need not be a software engineer, but we need to have an understanding of how IT functions in terms of what are the access rights, what are the technologies, what are the backup procedures, how the data is stored, how things are moving from one file to another. So for example, if you are doing an audit through SAP, you need to understand how SAP functions, what are the method in which the approval process happens in SAP, what are the control points, what are the checkpoints, what are the trails which are available, what trails are not available, and what are the areas where SAP is susceptible to risk, or any other software, be it Tally. So in Tally, is there a log available? Yes, log is available. Is it used? We don't know. Is lock available in Tally? Is password available in Tally? So a lot of times there are certain controls which are available in Tally, but today we may not be using. Those suggestions can also be given if we are understanding those softwares very clearly. Data mining is, of course, as an internal auditor, those skills are must in terms of mining the data, making sense out of the data, and taking it to a logical conclusion. This slide basically talks about the skill sets which an internal auditor should have, because the data analytics or the understanding of the data today is becoming very important, with a lot of companies having large data. So, how do we move up the value chain in terms of understanding what are the processes, what are the technologies available, how can I do it, what I can't do, and what I need to outsource, or where I need to partner with. These could be the skill sets which are there. I think this slide is to just summarize and wind up in terms of the technology, which is the only way forward today. And it can get involved from every aspect of audit, from the start to the end. It can ensure better value addition. Continuous investment in technology is a must. And, the buzzword which is there is maximum coverage with minimum time is something that we need to keep on doing it. One of the example which I've said earlier is that one of my clients wanted that, can you check all 100% payments, whether they are made to the correct bank account, or whether there is no error in those payments, or whether there are no duplicate payments. I mean, it's a large company. How do you do it if you have to just manually check it? Imagine the time and the cost which will go into it. So if you are able to download the entire data, use the software skills to see, sort, filter, then apply the right conditions to see whether there are any same amount, same vendor, all the conditions. If you are testing and if you are able to demonstrate some of these things, then obviously there is a lot of comfort which can be given, and then you do an extensive check on a larger sample, so that you know that yes, this has been checked, other audit steps have been performed, and based on that you may give a conclusion or an assurance, or you may give a report which says, no, there are issues or there are risks. So that is something where a lot of things can happen. Q&A, as I think it is said that we'll take up at the end, but we'll be happy to answer all the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Prashantji, for the wonderful presentation that you have provided, and really insightful. Like if I summarize, I've been into this profile from last couple of years. So if I summarize, like you have told about using statistical sampling, risk quantification technologies, root cause investigations, and like using SAP. In SAP, there is one GRC module. So using those modules for our internal audit and risk management purposes, and using technologies such as AI, process mining, robotics, and advanced analytics. So really insightful, like using log reports for IA. And also I love that part wherein you have highlighted wherein there is a integration that is required between an internal auditor and a IT team. Because if we want to frame some new module or I say dashboards, so IT team will surely need internal auditor helps to analyze the data and how they want to sort it, how they want their reports look like, and what all functions they have to build in. So and for whenever we go for access controls, ITGC controls, so obviously the need for internal auditor is required. So really, it's a very good presentation and really insightful.
Thank you.
So before proceeding with our second session on internal audit in a technology automation driven environment, I would like to introduce VGBSG. So VGBSG is currently working with HCL Technologies Limited as a Senior Vice President, Cybersecurity. He is the cost accountant and a BCom honors graduate with more than 3 decades of experience in governance, risk, and compliances, forensics, and advisory areas across various industries. His industry experience span manufacturing, telecommunication, consulting, IT, retail, and travel. His technical expertise includes internal audit and process engineering, advisory, SOX, IFC, revenue assurance, risk management, designing and implementation of governance framework and forensics. He is credited with formalizing and setting up the revenue assurance function in the telecom industry in India. So over to you, VGBSG.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm truly impressed with Prashant's presentation. I think he has covered pretty much all the facets of the internal audit. And thank you so much, Prashant. I think for that insightful presentation. Thank you. I'm only trying to find out how do I do this as a full page thing. So
I think you can take it to 100%. I think if you zoom.
Sir, you can do Control L.
Control L, is it okay? So yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. Thank you so much. A good evening and a warm welcome. And thanks to ICAI for giving me this opportunity for sharing my experience. So before I start this presentation, I'll give you a small example. Prashant touched upon the kind of skills that an internal auditor should have, or a non-technical audit head should have, in the profession. Because what happens is that when you head the internal audit function, or when you move towards the leadership role within the internal audit function, I think one of the key elements that you need to understand is that how well you understand technology. You might not be a technology gig, but you surely should be able to understand some of the jargons, the meaning behind those jargons, and then ask all the logical questions. I'll give you a small example. When I first joined the telecom company, where I introduced the revenue assurance function for the first time in the Indian telecom industry. So one of the areas that was never covered was the switching audit. Switch is considered to be the mother or the heart of the entire telecom function. It generates the CDRs, and then you rate the CDRs, and then you bill the customers. The calls get rated. So one of the questions I asked the technical team is that, how do you know that the switch is actually generating 100% of the CDRs and there is no leakage? So the technical team laughed at me because I'm a non-technical guy. I just joined this organization. I was just 3 months into this organization. And they said, they ridiculed me, saying, how can you ask such a silly question? It's like asking a person whether his heart is beating or not. And I said, fine, I do agree, but then you need to demonstrate that the heart is beating. So as an auditor, I have every right to question. You need to prove to me that it is beating and it is working the way it is designed to work. So finally, we performed an analysis. So CDRs, you're talking of huge numbers. So we got a dedicated server. It was actually a discarded server that we used. And we performed a reconciliation and came up with a certain number saying, the CDRs are getting missed, which means the switch is not generating CDRs intermittently. They just couldn't believe it. So when we presented the data, they sent this data to US. So they sent it to Bell Laboratories. Bell confirmed that there is a problem. They sent it to the Germany office. Germany office also confirmed that there is a problem with the switch. You'll be surprised that about 24% of the CDRs were not getting generated because of some technical issue. So imagine the amount of revenue leakage that was actually happening in the space. Most times what happens is that we take certain things for granted. We presume that there cannot be any leakage. And we get taken away by the technology explanations or jargons that are being used to demean you or to belittle your knowledge, right? And that's where the problems come up. The second question I asked is that, I said, once this was confirmed and we levied a huge penalty on this particular switching equipment company, then the next question I asked is that, how do you know that the CDRs that are getting generated from the switch are all getting transferred to the billing system for the rating? Again, the same problem. Again, we proved that some of the CDRs are actually getting missed in transit. They gave various explanations, technical explanations. This is a TCP. There are various transmission protocols. If the entire batch doesn't get pushed, the batch will get rejected. So all these technical jargons were provided. I said, prove it. They couldn't prove. So we proved to them that certain CDRs were getting missed. Again, they had to work back and then found there were technical glitches in that, because of which the CDRs were not getting processed or getting pushed completely to the billing system. The point I'm trying to make here is that you do not have to be a technology geek, but ask all the logical questions. You may presume, or the others might think, that you're asking all illogical or idiotic questions. It may sound idiotic to them, but not to you. Your primary responsibility is to provide an assurance. And therefore, you need to gather all the logical answers. If somebody cannot give, make sure that you engage an SME or an expert who has those answers for you, so that you can sign on the dotted line and say that, yes, I validated, I tested, and then I confirm that the processes are working the way they are designed to operate. So this is a small example I want to start with. Every auditor need not have to be an IT guy or an engineer or with an IT kind of a background. There is no need. But you need to be aware of the technology, how it operates, and make sure that you ask all the logical questions. In this presentation today, which is a very brief presentation, I'll try to share with you some of the learnings I had as a non-IT person heading the audit function of a large multinational company in India. And some of the things that you should typically be taking care. I mean, it's a huge area. It's not possible for us to cover in this 45-minute to 1 hour session. But then I'll try to touch upon some of the key elements, which will give you a fair sense in terms of, how you should probably plan your audit, the kind of an approach you should have, some of the facets that you should cover as part of your audit plan or engagement or coverage. So with this brief, I'll begin my presentation. Okay, so the question is, how do you typically, this area was also touched by Prashant in the earlier presentation, in terms of how do you build your annual audit plan? So I think this is something, you need to start with understanding the business. And I keep saying this in every forum that I talk. the quality of audit or the area of coverage is directly proportionate to the level of understanding you have about the business. About the business means about the business operations, the kind of systems and processes that have been implemented, the kind of changes that are happening within the organization, the kind of changes that are being planned for the future, the kind of issues that the organization has struggled with, all of this. So you need to have a thorough understanding of the organization that you work for, the product line, all of that. It becomes imperative before you even start. So which means that you completely, so when you're talking of an automation or an IT related environment, you need to understand the various applications, systems, whether these are homegrown applications or whether these are sourced or developed through an external vendor, the kind of technology that's being used, because technology changes by the hour. So how do you manage redundant technology? How are we using the latest technology, or are we using redundant technology? All of that. So you need to have a fair idea of the kind of a landscape that you are planning to review, audit, or assess. So next is you need to understand, as part of this, whether the organization uses any unredundant and unsupported. Typically in the Indian mentality, we do not want to throw anything away. If it is an old car, we make sure we transport till its last breath, or your regulator says that you can't get it onto the road anymore, right? We always use the Jugaad technology to keep it running. That's the problem everywhere. So we want to juice out the last drop and before we throw out the pulp, right? So what happens most times is that the technology becomes redundant, it doesn't get supported. But then imagine if it is managing critical information or data for the organization. I think you're in for some big time trouble. I think this is an area that you really need to understand in terms of, how do you manage various facets of your risk? It could be your business continuity, it could be information security. So continuity can be, if it is a downtime, what will happen? Can somebody come and fix it up? All of that. Okay. So I think that's something that somebody will have to very clearly understand and build it in, or bake it into your risk landscape. Next is thorough understanding of the processes. I'm happy that even Prashant touched upon it. When I talk about the processes, I think what we are referring to here is that whether these are manual, whether these are automated, or whether it is semi-automated, what is it? Who manage them? How do you manage them? So how robust are these processes? And whether these are automated, whether somebody touched upon logs, I think these are very, very important in terms of the configuration. So many people really do not get into an application or a system to understand the configuration controls. What are these configurations? Can somebody go and make these unauthorized changes? I'm probably jumping the gun. I think I'll touch upon it, right? And then who is responsible for managing and maintaining these processes become extremely important, because if something is happening, then you need to also be able to fix the responsibility. Imagine there is an unauthorized access, or there is an identity management issue. Then you need to be able to pin down the responsibility on somebody, that somebody will have to be held accountable and responsible for this lapse. Right. So I think you also need to understand the responsibility chart, and it's also important. So this will also help us to direct all the questions to the concerned person. Next is the other thing that we need to understand, which I touched upon briefly, is that what are the organization plans in terms of upgrading or updating their technology, or some of the automation initiatives of digitization upgrades, right? Because technology changes by the hour. And these days, every organization spends millions of dollars in upgrading. And for companies like HCL or some of the other organizations which manage customer information data, some of their processes, it becomes imperative that, we scale up and we remain the best in the business. So in terms of adoption of latest technology or processes. So this is a continuous activity. You need to understand what's exactly happening in this space. And then identify the associated risks and all of that. We'll touch upon it subsequently. The other thing that you need to understand is that merger acquisition related activities, again, this is something which is completely overseen. What happens is that whenever there is an acquisition, whatever level, there's a lot of integration which happens. You need to understand what applications and systems are being used by the acquired organization. How are we planning to integrate it? How the data integration will happen? How do you make sure that it's complete and accurate whenever the migration happens, or whether you want to use it as a standalone entity where you let that organization use their legacy software. You need to understand it, and then you need to plan your audits if it is critical. Then comes your the governance structure. Second line of defense, as it is classically called. Now, it's part of the management, extension arm of the management, and it's a dedicated function which with some degree of independence, which carries out regular reviews. You need to understand whether this second line of defense actually exists. If so, where all it exists, and then the roles and responsibilities. What do they do? What kind of reports do they churn out? Do they play an active role in providing advice and mitigating some of the mitigation controls or not? So you need to thoroughly understand the role and responsibility of the second line of defense. Then comes your incident tracking. So which means that in the IT or in the technology space, whether there have been any incidents. So I'm talking purely from the IT. I'm not talking from a manufacturing perspective, whether there have been accidents, downtime. I'm not getting into that. I'm talking purely from the IT and technology or systems, IT systems and applications perspective. So you need to understand whether there have been any incidents in the past or intrusions in the past, or whether there have been any unauthorized access and somebody tried to steal information or data, whether there have been any past history. And how do you know that? You will have to access the reports or assessments done by the second line, or by the past internal audit reports, or by the reports of the external auditor, or the organization could have engaged a third-party SME to carry out investigations, and they could have issued a report. So you need to discuss with the various stakeholders to see that whether there is a need for you to look into particular area based on its historical data. Next comes the risk assessment part. So one of the regularly used jargon is risk-based audit. So many people are still in the process of understanding how do you actually carry out a risk-based audit, or what is a risk-based audit? Now, how do you identify the various elements? So it's an area in itself, it's a subject in itself. But then what you should ideally do is that you need to actually take inputs from various drivers. It could be your external auditors, internal auditors, the audit committee, the management. Then if you're working with some of these outsourcing partners, you talk to them, then you conduct your own risk assessments using multiple parameters. Parameters could be like, whether the key processes are automated or semi-automated, and whether propensity to fraud, whether you had any fraud incidents there. Then, of course, a touch base with the ERM function, if they have identified any of the risks. So there are multiple things that gets baked into it. So the audit planning process itself is about 2 to 3 month process, where you discuss and then you have you gain thorough understanding about the industry, about your peers in terms of what is it that they are doing. So and you also gather a lot of intelligence around it. And then finally, you do an impact assessment, and then you identify, as Prashant rightly said, the resources are limited, and then you need to provide an assurance to the management. And therefore, you identify the key things that are relevant to the business. And what is it's relevant, so if the business says that, I need to achieve certain parameters during the year, so you link up all of this towards the common objective of the organization, and say that, okay, these are all the mitigation actions that have been put in place to achieve the organizational goals and objectives. And then you, as an independent assessor, review and assess the effectiveness, design and effectiveness of the various controls that have been put in place to mitigate the potential risks which act as an impediment in achieving those organizational goals. And you, as an independent organization, report to the audit committee, because they have a responsibility towards the shareholders in achieving those results, because that's what they publish, right? So this is in a nutshell what is the role of internal audit and our responsibility. Then finally, I think once you do all of this, you also know that broadly what are the areas that you plan to cover. Now, nothing is cast in stone. When you prepare an annual audit plan, it goes through probably, every month you review that plan to see that you're up to date. The plan is relevant at that particular point in time. Because what happens, certain processes could have undergone a change, or certain M&A activity or hiving off activity could have happened, because of which certain things may not be necessary, or the management might say that we are planning to discontinue these operations, and therefore they feel that it may not be relevant, right? So some of these changes keep happening, and more important things might even crop up. So you keep reviewing the annual audit plan on a periodic basis. You can decide whether it needs to be monthly, quarterly, or half yearly, and then make sure that you review the plan and the coverage, and then look at the kind of skills and expertise that you need to conduct these audits. You need to see whether these are available in-house, whether you want to source them, whether you want to hire them, or whether you want to outsource them. So that's a strategy that the head of audit will take, but depending upon the assessment of availability of skills or the competency assessment that the audit head does along with the team leaders, right? Whether I have the capability and competency to be able to conduct and cover a particular audit, right? So this in broad is how you typically approach. I'm giving you this is a bird's eye view kind of a share. But of course, there are a lot of granular things which go into this. And so I jump on to the next slide. Now, these are some of the suggestions which I have, that I've acquired based on my experience, having worked in multiple companies. Most of them are all technology based. So one of the things that we need to have when you execute the audits, and some of the suggestions from my side, is to make sure that you have the right expertise with the right skills. And this is very important, because when you present a report to the audit committee or to the management, if they have to really take notice of your findings, they also should be able to understand that you had the capability and competency to be able to assess a particular area which is not your area of core competency, because and more so when you are not from a technology kind of a background. And a similar thing would happen if a technologist is auditing a finance related area, or a tax related area, or a compliance related area, right? So you're not expected to have all these skills available on this planet. So it's important for you to present the credentials of the team which has conducted the audit. Now, that audit could have been either outsourced, or you could have insourced some of the skills, or you could have used in-house skills, right? Or you could have even hired some of the experts. So once you do this, your report gains credibility more so in front of the audit committee, and they take note of your findings, and they take it far more seriously. The other thing which I have realized is that most times I think a lot of time is spent on design. While I say that design is equally important, right? But I think we seem to miss on the effectiveness of that control. Let me give you an example. Let's say that nothing wrong has actually happened, right? You picked up a sample. You found that the process has not been either documented, has not been circulated. But then when you did the analytics, or when you reviewed the process, you didn't find anything wrong, right? So things were happening. They were supposed to happen, even though it has not been documented. Maybe somebody who had good, thorough understanding of the process was managing that process. That definitely is important, because most times what happens, we get stuck at the design level. We say that this is not documented, and you keep writing that repeatedly in the audit report. What is more important is that, is somebody managing that? Did non-documentation of a process adversely affect the outcome of your audit finding is equally important. So I think my suggestion is that I think spend more time in assessing the effectiveness of controls rather than design. At the same time, I'm not undermining at any point in time the importance of design. It is absolutely important that you document it so that there is uniformity, everybody understands it, especially when there is a change. Next is, most times what happens, Prashant talked about data analytics and all of that. One of the biggest challenges I found is that integrity of information on data. Even while conducting the audits, I've seen evidences being falsified. Unless and until you cross-check and validate some of the evidences or data that have been provided to you and make sure that it passes the integrity check, please do not ever accept that information or data or evidence or any document. And this is the bigger problem in an IT environment, where you can create any PDF, any email, you can create any evidence that you want. And most times what happens is that the management or the auditee is more than happy to provide you with some documentary evidence. That's a big problem. I think that's where effectiveness of controls become far more important, where you talk to the process owner or the control owner and then try to understand whether he truly understands what he's saying and validate. Most times what happens, he gives you a piece of paper. A simple example is somebody is signing off on a bank reconciliation statement. You go and ask the guy who signed and said, what did you check in this? You will not get an answer. And second signatory on a check, you ask him, why did you sign? What did you check before you sign? As a second signatory, he will say that because the first one signed, I signed it. So it defeats the basic purpose, right? When you have a validation check, the process control should very clearly define what is he supposed to check. Most times, the process document doesn't specify what aspects need to be checked. And that's a big problem today. So when you go conduct an inquiry, or I'm not saying inquiry as part of your audit evidence gathering, the control owner or the process owner is completely clueless. So I think that becomes a big challenge. So the fourth point is on the detective controls. I've been shouting from the rooftops, majority of the frauds happen because of absence or weakness of detective controls. We have, having moved, because I've been in this profession for 33 years, I've started my career in internal audit and I'm retiring from internal audit. And this has been a biggest problem ever since we moved into an automotive environment, because everything we feel that is a preventive control and therefore we don't have to worry about a detective control. And that's the biggest problem, because once the preventive control is compromised, then I think there is no secondary check to be able to identify a leakage or a fraud or a theft. It's a big problem that I see today. And the detective control means what? I mean, it should be able to timely detect. There's no point having a detective control, you detect a fraud after a year of it's happening. It doesn't help. A detective control's effectiveness is that you have a control which detects in a timely manner. Now, whichever way it could be a manual intervention or it could be an automated intervention. But you need to have very strong detective controls, which used to be there in a manual kind of an environment, because I've seen manual JVs, journals, and all of that. You had very strong checks and balances. I'm not saying we never had frauds, but very minimal frauds, and they used to get detected very quickly. So that's something that auditors should keep in mind when they review the design and effectiveness. Please look at detective controls, that if the primary control fails, is there a way how a failure can be detected and how quickly it can get detected. The next point Prashant did touch upon. This is something where we have implemented at various organizations, be it in SAP or in any application. When you actually touch configuration changes or make changes to changes to critical configurations, let's say in an SAP, if somebody were to go and tinker with the bank account, and instead of putting the vendor bank account, somebody goes and puts his individual's personal bank account, what happens? Can somebody do it? If somebody does it, who has the authority, who has access, and if there's a collusion, what happens? Now you do not have a detective control. The detective control here is if it can automatically flag off. So the moment you actually finalize your configurations, once it has been tested, once it has been cleared, once it has been approved, any change to that, be it authorized or unauthorized, whatever, the system should be able to automatically send those alerts. It could be through SMSs, it could be through emailers, it could be all to key management personnel that this particular configuration either has been changed or these data sets have been compromised. So that will at least ensure the integrity. For example, I'll tell you simple things like the month-end closure dates or year-end closure dates. Somebody goes, opens, closes, and without any check or balance, just imagine what will be the plight of an external auditor. Or somebody passes some entries after the sign-off. I mean, who will keep a tab on these? So I think when you define these automated controls, these should be part and parcel. The moment they have been frozen, they have been signed off, post that any change, even including suppression of generation of logs or these SMS alerts or emailers, it should be able to send that somebody went ahead and deactivated generation of logs or deactivated sending of emailers. So somebody will wake up in the organization and say, wow, who did this and why did it happen? Right. So I think this is something which is drastically missing in the present situation. So next is when you actually initiate an audit, so you don't want to reinvent the wheel because a lot of work would have probably happened or is happening in that space. So typically either the second line or maybe some agency appointed by the management could be reviewing those areas. So you might want to have a look at those reports in terms of the coverage, in terms of the findings, or if the management is busy trying to fix those issues, there's no point, highlighting those issues one more time, right? So you can actually piggyback on the work done by some of these external experts or the second line or the agencies appointed by the management. And then you can follow up in terms of implementation of the agreed mitigation actions. So we talked about the prior audit reports by the external or the internal auditor to see that, if there are any areas that's of concern to you from the past audits, whether they have been mitigated. Because one of the cruelties is that, if you identify repeat issues, which means that you keep on doing an audit and the management says, I fixed it, and then you keep on identifying that as a problem. I think that's a big concern even to the audit committees. So I think that's where, you're more concerned in terms of whether it's a permanent fix or it's a superficial fix that, somebody is only putting a band-aid, which is a temporary fix just to please an auditor and get the issue closed. I think that's a big issue. And that need to be highlighted and reported that I think either the auditee is not taking it seriously or the management is not taking it seriously, or maybe the recommendation that have been given itself is faulty. So either of these could happen. Next is, I think the other thing that you need to be very, very careful is that whenever you have to hire external SMEs or experts, because it's not possible that you would have all the skills under the sun. So you end up engaging some of the external experts. The only word of caution here is that make sure that, most times what happens in the present scenario, the managements typically engage these external experts if they have to implement a new application or if they have to go for a new IT landscape. So they would typically, engage some of the external experts. You don't want a situation you end up hiring the same consultants who implemented the particular thing for the organization. So it will result in a conflict of interest. They would never be able to identify any defect in what they have implemented. So make sure that, when you do this area, understand whether it was an in-house implementation or whether external experts were engaged, who were those experts, who is the partner or the key individual who performed this, and whether there's a way how you can actually isolate. Because if the skills are very limited, especially the taxation space and some of the others, now your skills are very limited. So you might want to be sure that, you don't want you engage the same individual or the partner who did the job for the organizations. Now, next is the fraud part. Whether there have been any investigations, what is the kind of a process or a mechanism you have in the organization? Whenever frauds are identified or detected, who does the investigation? Now, if there are vulnerabilities, if there are intrusions, if there are cyber attacks, who did the investigation? Why did it happen? And what is the kind of a fix? You need to thoroughly understand this, because if there's a fraud vulnerability and if it is remaining unfixed, it might happen again. So I think you need to, and the other bigger problem is this. Most times what happens, if a fraud has happened in a particular area, you go and fix it in that area, but then a similar vulnerability could be existing across various applications or across various domains. So you don't try to extend this to the others or test it in the other domains or other areas. And so what happens, you're waiting for an event to happen at a later date. So you want to understand whether it's a complete fix or it's a band-aid kind of a localized fix. And leaving the others still vulnerable, right? So when you do this assessment, you make sure that it's a holistic assessment, and before you decide on your audit scope or you finalize the audit scope. So I jump on to the next slide. Use of freeware. This is a big problem, and more so you see this in smaller organizations or entities, where to cut costs, they use a lot of freeware. Now, we do not know with what kind of vulnerabilities or embedded risks it comes with. And that's a big problem. It's also used extensively in the application development. So one has to be extremely careful. So whenever, you come across an organization and you are working for an organization which has an in-house IT application development team, you need to spend significant amount of time to understand whether what kind of software do they use? Are these licensed software? Are these software which are still being supported by the OEMs, or do we use freeware? What kind of freeware? Where do we use it? Is it used only for testing? See, the problem is this, where even when you use in a test environment, what happens is that if a particular software has a vulnerability, it might act as a gateway to your other applications. So it's like this, your entire house is secure, but your one window is open. And that window is your unlicensed software or a freeware. And somebody can actually enter through the window and gain access to your entire home or a house, right? So that's what we are talking about. So because it's all integrated, if you have the applications servers connected on a particular network, all one has to do is gain entry, and then he will have unrestricted access. So that need to be understood. Coding related vulnerabilities, again, it's part of your application development. So if you do not follow secured coding protocols, what happens is that you leave a lot of gaps or vulnerabilities. And when you host it on different technologies, it could be cloud. Each technology comes with its own set of vulnerabilities. Then what kind of accesses do you provide? How do you connect it internally and through the net to the outside world? How does the data move, whether it is encrypted, unencrypted? All kinds of things actually come into this coding part. So you need to at least understand that there could be. So I'm talking purely from common sense. I am not a technology guy, but I ask all these commonsensical questions. I said that, how does this happen? How does this happen? How does data move? In what form and shape does it move? So it can be through your archival, it could be through for processing, it could be testing, it could be any of that, right? So you need to understand who are the users, how is it connected, all of that. So you ask these layman questions, and then you have your technical team and you tell them, see, I want you to go and confirm whether this has been taken care. So nobody is wanting you to go and fix it. But then you would understand that as an area of risk, and then you have your team to go and test it. A team means what? It could be outsourced, in a house, or whatever, right? BCP-DR is another thing. More so when you use software that is unlicensed or unsupported systems or applications, then what about continuity? What happens? What happens in case of downtime? What happens in case if there is a threat that you have to shut down the software? It could be a ransomware through cyber attacks. What happens? We have seen what happened during the pandemic. How does organizations work? How do you provide access? How do you provide assets? How do you make sure that the information exchange between the end user laptop and the server is secure when it passes through the internet, right? So how do you make sure? And of course, how your servers are all safe, and there are a bunch of things that you need to look at, from the other aspects. Change management process is something very, very critical from the audit perspective. Prashant touched about rule-based applications, so be it AI, MI, all of that. So the way they work is on the success. So just to explain to you as a layman, what an application does is that you create a rule. So that therefore, see, one of the things for the success of AI or MI is the volume of data, which means larger the volume of data, greater will be the precision with which these applications work. Now, how do they work? When you write a rule, say that, okay, in a combination of 1, A, B, C, if the combination is of A, B, C, perform this activity. The combination is C, E, F, you perform this activity. So that's how you write a rule. What the initial part, what the application will do is that it will validate how many times in the past with this kind of a combination, a particular activity has been initiated. So if the higher the success rate, depending upon how you configure, it will either go and execute the activity on its own, or it will refer those activities to you, say that I see this as a suspicious activity based on the historical data, and then throws up an alert. So most times what happens, if the success rate is 90, 95 or even 100%, where if this is the combination, this ought to be a fraud, they would either go and block it, or they would, whatever activity that need to be performed, they would actually write it as a rule, and the system would go ahead and do it. If a new combination crops up, it throws up as an alert and says that, okay, there's a new combination for which I don't find any historical data. Please tell me what I'm supposed to do. So that's how it actually builds its intelligence. So depending upon the volume of data and the kind of actions that have been initiated based on the various combinations, permutations and combinations, it decides what activity need to be performed or it flags off. One of the things, and typically you use a system called SIM. I'll touch upon it maybe in the subsequent, right? So one of the things that you want to look at as part of your change management is that how are the rules defined? Who has, who can go ahead and change the rule? Can somebody go and suppress a rule? And is it, can somebody, so it's quite possible that it's the two authorized person may collude and then might suppress something, right? So how does this entire ITGC related controls, access controls, and the detection controls work in this kind of an environment? Because what happens is that you blind, if a particular event is not reported by the SIM, right, then you presume that everything is fine. But could it be possible that somebody went ahead and changed the rules in the background, right? So I think these are the things that you need to look at. In telecom, we found where people have changed the configurations from an international call to a domestic call. Therefore, international calls were all getting rated as a domestic call. It was a fraud on the company, right? So the problem here is that, they didn't activate an alert system there. So two people can collude and do whatever that they want to do, right? They can route the calls the way they can route. So it's more from the telecom side. So all I'm saying is that even if it is a rule-based kind of an application or an AI or an MI, make sure that you engage with somebody to understand who has the access, how that's what we call as a change management. It could be any application. So if certain things are getting changed in an application, certain configurations are getting changed in an application, certain upgrades are being made to an application, make sure that it follows stringent change management process along with the alert process. So the process for I'm talking of information security here. We need to understand what all processes do we have to ensure integrity, integrity, availability, and confidentiality of the information or data. So how do you make sure that information is not passing out? We use typically DLP software, data leakage protection software. So the moment you try to copy something, which is once you define what all information is which is called as data classification. So you identify which data is critical to the organization. So any data which has been identified critical for the organization, the moment you either try to copy it or send it over an email or through the internet, immediately it sends an alert to a certain set of people, and it will also block, and including your superior, that this information is attempted to be sent outside, right? So they use something called as web sense, and there are multiple tools and applications available in the market. But then you also need to see that whether we have those kind of steps available or processes available to ensure organizational data. The data is also, I'll touch upon it later, it has a direct touch point in the way you manage the IT assets. So I'll come to that. Next is the privacy. I think a lot of people have spoken about it. So this is an emerging thing, and especially when you have cross-border transfer of data from various countries, data privacy regulations kick in. These are extremely stringent, and some of the penalties are mind-boggling. So I think a lot of organizations have taken a lot of cognizance. They are extremely stringent, and please also understand, they also pose a major impediment to internal auditors. For example, if you want to do a payroll audit of a European entity, employees of the European entity, you cannot. So because you're accessing private information, which could be the name, is date of birth, this bank account, blah, blah, by salary details, all of that. So you have to go through, you have to seek his prior approval and permission. Every employee's data that you touch, you need to get explicit approvals in writing. Make sure that you comply with all the data privacy regulations. It's next to impossible. Even fraud investigations, you cannot access emails. You cannot access past emails. The individual has every right. In certain countries, the individual has every right to share with him all the information and data that you collected pertaining to him. By regulation, by law, he or she has the authority. Or so these are extremely complex. Every country has its own version of the privacy. India also would be having it very soon. So somebody will have to understand the restrictions, the limitations, and therefore your audit methodology or your investigation methodology would also undergo a significant change. See, for example, in India, I can walk across and bribe somebody, get a bank account statement. You can't do that overseas. No way, right? If you want to trace certain transactions, you can't do that. So there are a lot of things which would kick in even in India once the privacy thing becomes prevalent. Next is remote access is another big problem. So you provide remote access to OEMs to fix or for upgrades and all of that. So what are the kind of processes do you have? What kind of accesses do you provide? Do you bid the revocation of access? We have seen frauds happen because the revocation has not happened. The individual left the OEM organization, joined somewhere, and he accessed the application and did what all that he has to do. So we had lots of issues. So how do you actually manage the remote access? What kind of controls do we have in terms of granting access? When do you revoke? How do you revoke? Who monitors the activities performed by the external person who is not an employee of the organization, and sign off? So I think that becomes extremely important. Then similar to that is your super user controls. I've not added here, but again, same process. The individual would have root level access, which means they can go delete or modify it. They can do it in any application, including SAPs of the world. So you have to be extremely careful in terms of who has this access, how is this password protected, and how does that command chain work, and who actually monitor what work has happened. And therefore these real-time alerts become extremely important. ITGC is something I'm sure pretty every auditor would know. Now is something, before you even see, why are these ITGC application controls are important? Because for an external auditor, any information that gets generated from these applications to place reliance or reliability on these, somebody will have to assess that the way the applications have been managed, they have got adequate controls around them, and therefore the information which is coming out of these applications are reliable and trustworthy, and therefore I can place reliance on them before I start working or using them. So similarly, I think you have to make sure that you regularly assess the ITGC. There are 4 domains for ITGC and application controls. Typically they look at access and how do you end user controls, all of that. So how do you manage all of that? There are 4 domains, and then you typically look at the effectiveness of controls around these 4 domains. So I'm saying, you need not have to be an expert in this area, but make sure that you're aware of this, that if there is an application, I just do not go and extract data and start working on analytics. No. Is the data reliable? Is the data consistent? Is it possible that the data that I extract today doesn't match up with the data that I extract tomorrow? No. How did that happen? Even in SAP, there are a lot of backend programs that are being made. These are not SAP programs, right? They're called ABAP programs. So you don't even know, who is writing what rule and who is changing what rule. And today you take a data statement, it shows something, and tomorrow you take the same data, it will show something else because somebody went ahead and changed, right? So I think that's a problem. And so somebody will have to be extremely cautious whenever you accept any data, whenever you plan to accept any data from any application or system. Make sure that that data is reliable and that data is consistent and it is accurate, right, and complete. So network security is again more technical in terms of how have I interconnected various applications, how does that data move. We talked about intrusion, more from the cyber side. When you are interfacing with the external world, how does that work? What are the kind of checks and balances? We have seen vulnerabilities in some of the OEM equipments, because there were certain vulnerabilities in IBM chips because of which somebody could intrude. So I think it's to that extent, the technology has developed today. Even a minutest of a technology vulnerability can provide a gateway to a potential hacker or an intruder. So while we do not have the technical expertise, but we do speak to the OEMs and we are aware of what's happening in the external world. We keep, attending various forums, and we subscribe to various newsletters so that what is actually happening in the technology space if you're working for a technology-based company, so that you will not be caught unaware. At the same time, when you sit in the audit committee, you don't look blank saying, I don't understand. And similarly, if something is happening, if there is an issue or an event which has happened in one of your peer companies, you definitely have a network and you speak to them, because I'm the founding member of the internal heads of all the IT companies, right? So like the Infi, TCS and all that, we keep interacting, we keep meeting, we keep talking to each other in terms of the kind of processes, the kind of issues, and how do we fix them, right? So you make sure that you don't wait for the same thing to come and hit you. So you're well prepared, because your peers have already had a problem. So you see a lot of content being there in the dark web. I'm not too sure how many of you are aware of the dark web. So a lot of information is available in the dark web, where typically the hackers steal and then publish it in the dark web, where it is freely available. So I move to the next one. I will not take much of time. So I talked about SIM, it's security information and event management. This is an application which completely tracks any violation or intrusion, and it's an intrusion detection system primarily, and then alerts, sends out alerts. So one of the things, if you're auditing this particular space, one of the things that you might want to look at is that what is the percentage of positive alerts, which means that it has correctly identified out of 100 events. If it has identified 95 events as potential frauds accurately, that means its accuracy rate is 95. But when you talk to the IT team, they would typically say it is 40, 45, and they will have their own unsubstantiated numbers. So for the system to be effective, there's no point throwing 100 alerts where all 100 are false, right? It only sucks up your management time investigating those. That means there's something wrong either with the rule, or it doesn't have the sufficient data to be able to prepare some kind of data fingerprint, and because of which it is throwing up a lot of false alerts. So what is important is that what is it? Alert conversion ratio in terms of the accuracy. So out of 100 alerts, if it is able to identify 95% as 100% fraud or a possible fraud, that means its accuracy is pretty good. The way the rules have been written is pretty good. It has sufficient historical data available to be able to do the analysis. So, so I think this is something that somebody can look at if somebody is looking in an automated, because pretty much every organization today, builds its processes on IT applications and systems. Unauthorized download of software, because what happens is that every organization gives individuals the laptops and various other things, and then you end up downloading all kinds of software. Imagine if those software has inbuilt viruses, Trojan horses, or any of these viruses. Then what happens is that it spreads from one computer, and then it can completely harm the entire organization. So you need to have a very strong process to ensure that nobody downloads on an official laptop any of these unauthorized software or software which are only authorized by the organization. Is something that need to be implemented. You need to have very, very strong controls. Then employee training and certification process becomes extremely important, because every organization, depending upon the maturity level of the organization, should have regular training and orientation sessions in terms of do's and don'ts. I'm not touching upon a lot of these nuts and bolts in terms of not opening unauthorized emails, like picking up whenever I do an audit. One of the things that we look at is the employee behavior by dropping. We infect pen drives. But not infection means not a virus, but then the moment somebody sees, he gets tempted to pick up something which is lying either on the table or on somebody else's table, and then plugs it in, and then immediately you get an alert saying, this fellow picked up the pen drive and then plugged it into the application. Imagine if it is a virus, it immediately spreads, right? So it's all employee behavior. So whether somebody is tempted to open some of these unauthorized emails, or picking up these unauthorized pen drives, or and then how does the individual react, whether he is trying to connect to some guest network somewhere, right, or trying to be this is what we call it as social engineering, in terms of downloading by beating the process, all kinds of things, right? So I think therefore the employee training becomes extremely important to make sure that most of these are all employee behavior related, while technology and process is one, in terms of your hardening, into your antivirus, blah, 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 your firewalls, all of that is a separate process altogether. But then employee training becomes extremely important to very, very large extent, especially from the external threats and intrusions. We talked about DLP websins in the past. I briefly mentioned about these asset management controls. See, one of the biggest problems that we have today is that organizations do not track and monitor, especially large organizations, various IT assets that have been issued to the employees. It could be laptops, it could be phones, it could be tape drives, pen drives, all kinds of things. The individuals have access to. Now, what happens to these? Because typically what happens is that these data storage tapes or devices are all written off as consumables. So you don't even have inventory of these, but then these contain critical data. And for a company like HCL or some of the companies like HCL, where we also could carry a lot of client critical information or data, right? So imagine the kind of risk that we expose the organization to. So what kind of asset controls do you have? When an employee leaves the organization, or when a laptop becomes redundant and then you want to refresh it by issuing a new laptop, what happens to the pen drives? What happens to the hard drives of these laptops? Do you digitally, do you magnetically destroy them? And how do you make sure that this happens before you dispose of these laptops as part of your IT disposal process? So you review the IT disposal process, IT as an issuance process, or if somebody says I've lost a laptop, then what do you do with it? Can you remotely access this particular laptop to erase or clean out all this information or data? What happens when an employee leaves the organization and reissues that laptop to another employee? What kind of a process do you have? A lot of these things, it's an area again in itself. And again, it's an area which is where a lot of focus has not been given, unfortunately. But this is an area where you will see a lot of vulnerability. I wish I had more time to share some of the examples or some of the other elements, but I think I've given you some kind of an idea of mostly to the audit community who do not come with an external, with an IT kind of a background. Maybe I'm sure I think a lot of people would have been a CISA or CISSPs, but generically, this is what I have learned as a non-IT individual or a person, which I hope is of some help and use to the auditing community. Thank you once again for giving me this opportunity. Happy to take any questions, if not now or at the later time, or you can even email me. I'll be more than happy. If I do not know the answers, I'll make sure that I get answers and come back to you. Thank you once again, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Vijay. Yes, sir, for your really wonderful insights on this topic. I'm sure a lot of people have never touched upon this area as well. So, and I seriously like some of the areas, like because I've worked in that area, and like the way you have given the updation in technology. Like there is one data protection bill which you was talking about, like it is coming in, and the way you have said that data integration, we use interface testing of some of the applications. The way you told us about using firewall logs or SIMs for incident tracking. And I really agree with what you have said about like checking of detective controls should be equally important, like to have primary controls in place and to check those controls. And yes, alerts should be a very good option for configuration changes. And and you have also touched upon that data classification, which we all can even relate. Like when we use our email, there is one bar which is coming which says this file should be classified as highly confidential, public. So yes, a lot of good insights have captured from this. I'm sure a lot of people have captured this beautiful insights from you. So moving on.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So moving on to our third speaker, Amit Jaiswal ji. So I tell you something about him. Amit Jaiswal ji is a chartered accountant with more than 15 years of experience in internal audit. He leads the global internal audit function at Cipla and is associated with the Cipla since past 9 years. At Cipla, He is responsible for global internal audit, design of controls, including IFC, risk analytics, statutory compliances, drafting of policies, procedure, and DOA. He is having an in-depth knowledge of pharmaceutical business, its processes, risk, and controls. So over to you, Amit Jaiswal ji, to throw some light on analytics engine, enabler of internal audit.
Thank you very much, Shubham. Thank you very much, Shubham. Good evening, everyone. So I'd like to first thank the Internal Audit Standard Board and Mr. Nandaji for giving me this opportunity. I'm Amit Jaiswal. The topic of presentation today is on analytics engine, the enabler of internal audit. So I'm sure you all will have used analytics, data analytics, risk analytics during your analysis, audits, and various other initiatives. In our organization also, we started this journey around 3.5 years back, and by now we have developed around 25-30 analytics for various processes. Okay, so I'll put up my slide first. Is the screen up, Shubham?
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe first let's try to understand why risk analytics is important. Okay. So it helps. Firstly, it helps business to get better insights, detailed insights, which in turn helps them to take business decisions. Secondly, with the pandemic situation currently, the situation which we are, this has made risk analytics as a more important tool for us to do analysis. Now there are no more we can go to office and do vouching, physical vouching. Hence, for controls testing, we need to depend on the tools which will help us to do analysis. Okay, and a pandemic has accelerated the need of digital initiatives, and one of the initiative in that journey happens to be risk analytics. The third one is most of the controls or the testing which we do as part of audit, as part of controller, those are routine ones. Okay, we need to do this on a periodic basis, monthly basis, as per the business need. Now, when this is done manually, it requires effort, it requires cost, time, energy. If we try to automate this through a tool, the entire effort gets translated into the IT platform, and then every month the entire output is available in a click of button. And fourthly is the output of the risk analytics is standardized. Okay, if it is done manually, the output may differ basis individual who is performing the analysis, and there are chances of manual errors. Okay, so this tool, by using the tool, those errors can be eliminated. There are many benefits of using these tools, like simplifying the process, bringing in automation in the testing. Early warning signals can be highlighted by indicating red flags or fraud indicators. Huge volume of data can be continuously monitored. Right? There are various processes, be it procure to pay, be it HR, payroll, order to cash, various processes. Standard testing has to be performed, be it from a controller's perspective, IFC testing perspective, or an internal audit. Right? This helps us to do continuous monitoring. This also supports the management to eliminate their way of working in terms of using PPT or an Excel sheet. This tool can be configured or used to develop the MISs which the business presents, okay, to the higher management. This also helps us to build a stronger second and third line of defense. Now, since the tool is being used on the entire set of data, it's no more dependent on the samples. It will be done on the holistic entire set of data. So the assurance which the management will get will be very high. The reliance on the assurance will be very high. Moving to the next is, while building the risk analytics tool, there are some prerequisites which one has to consider. Okay, those are maybe vision and strategy, data governance, people, as well as technology. If I deep dive into these 4 aspects is, so in any organization, the vision and the strategy to use the risk analytics tool or data analytics tool has to be very clear. It is a tone at the top which will define the success of this initiative. Okay, and maybe basis the what do you say, the tone, if there is a larger alignment with the head of the business, the department heads, the success will be the better. Data governance also has 4 elements: is the availability of the data, the integrity, the quality of the data, as well as the source of the data. Now, whenever one has to decide in terms of which area one has to take to develop a risk analytics, these 4 elements has to be considered. And one is the availability of data. Availability of data should be in a digital and a structured format, right? Manual data will not help. So the quality of and the integrity of the data is also important. That means that the data which is available in the soft form should be complete data. There shouldn't be missing fields, missing data points, because the output will depend upon the quality of the input which we provide, right? Because at the end, it is the tool which will give the output. Another thing is the source of the data. We should be clear in terms of the source of the data, be it from any ERP system or any other system, or a manual data which can be integrated with the tool. Okay, the people. This is also very important aspect, because to make this successful, this initiative successful, we should collaborate with the business, with the functions, with these relevant stakeholders, the finance colleagues. Okay, to take them along in this journey, understand from their requirements. We should understand what they need in terms of from a continuous monitoring perspective or from an MIS perspective. This will also help us to get their detailed understanding of this business, because they do this day in, day out, right? And the last one is from a technology. Okay. Technology, again, the entire technology, be it your cloud-based tools, then the visual tool, development platform. Okay, these should be aligned with the overall organization IT policy. Okay, so these are 4 pillars, and which are very key. One has to consider. Okay, the next is in terms of while it's not that easy, the way maybe I'm bringing it across to you guys, that the tool needs to be developed, there are challenges. Okay, team will face challenges while developing this tool. Few would be, and it will be dependent on organization to organization, but some common themes which we have come across, or which I have seen with various other colleagues, is there are resistance from the business team at the initial stage. See, unless until we demonstrate the value addition to the team, unless until they see the benefit, they'll not be with you. So this is very important in terms of alignment at the initial stage itself. Okay, lack of involvement, because you'll need the process owners to support you in terms of be the process understanding, the controls environment, as well as the data. Okay, but we have seen there is lack of involvement, difficulty in adapting to the newer technology. Okay, and the lack of clarity in terms of ownership, the data source, integration of the data quality challenges. These are certain challenges which one will face, but always with these challenges there are opportunities, there are ways and means to overcome these challenges, and it is, these challenges are not a roadblock, I'll say. These are just which will come across during the development stage, but I think so with the strong governance and the process which we set around this development, I think so we'll be able to come across these challenges. Now, at least, as I mentioned, we have developed around 25-30 processes. The analytics tool can be developed for most of the processes, wherever we have data in digital format, right? If you see from a revenue side, there are order to cash. There are some areas which are technical to pharmaceutical industry, but order to cash, the business side on the discounted rate or an institution business, the pricing of the product, right? Be it pharma, be it FMCG, be it any company, the pricing decisions are important. The returns are there, sales return, where the sales return and expiry return, okay, and so on and so forth in terms of revenue. From a spend perspective, in procurement, marketing spend, logistics spend, travel spend, and a solvent for manufacturing facilities. These are the various areas within spend expenses one can develop. Inventories for a supply chain area in terms of planning and inventory management. Certain corporate functions which we have taken up in terms of record to report, payables, treasury, payroll. So these areas are heavy in terms of data. The controls which need to be tested are in terms of those are to some extent or more or less standardized, which one can do the testing. Okay, I think so. There are many more areas. Basis, as I mentioned, the enablers, be data quality, data availability. Those are the enablers one should evaluate before taking up any area. Also, this tool helps us to identify fraud indicators. Okay, these are sort of early warning signals. Some outliers, be it concentration on any specific vendor while procurement is done. Okay, alternate quote is not obtained. Be it the price differences. Payroll reconciliation is another thing where we can do analysis. Expense reimbursement, we see that because the companies will have huge field force, right? The sales team, then there are lots of reimbursements which are done by these field force. We see that there are due to system control gaps, due to different systems, using different systems for be it attendance monitoring and reimbursement. We have seen cases where people can claim excess claim, okay, because those two systems are not talking to each other. So there are many companies, organizations have multiple systems, right? And more these systems may not speak to each other. As a result, there may be some control gaps. By implementing analytics tool, the output from these different tools can be brought in together. Some common fields can become, some common data points can be correlated, and an exception can be identified. So be it product diversion, revenue recognition, procurement, and there are lots of many examples which we have developed, and I'm sure many companies and many colleagues of who are on the call will be doing this. So now the next stage. So now that we have developed, we have seen success to this, what are the next stages of development, right? Because we should not get complacent in terms of whatever we have done, we should continue doing this. Two things is, one, due to changing business environment, due to changing control environment, due to change in personnel, due to change in risk environment, the controls which have been configured, which has been configured in the tool, should be revisited annually at least, to evaluate whether the exceptions which one has expected to get are they a relevant one. Second, there are no more there are false positives are not being deflected. The trend, if it's showing that the controls, if the controls have matured, my exceptions will go down, right? So there we need to rethink in terms of what are the other controls where we need to see. Even the auditees or the team are working on their improvement of the controls, right? So we have to see the other avenues. So there, I think so we should evaluate whatever we have developed on an annual basis or as and when the time is required. Okay. The another part is in terms of next step is predictive analysis. See, whatever till now I have spoken is on the past data. Okay, historical. Gap, whatever will come out has already happened. Okay, now only thing is we'll need to do a corrective actions or a preventive so that it doesn't occur. But the predictive analysis is what will help us to predict the gap well in advance before it occurs. This is the area which I think so we have initiated this activity, and even if the company, the management of the company, the board, they are also expecting that how you can preempt, how you can evaluate controls well in advance or gaps which may come across and try to fix those. Okay, rather than acting on it, how we can be preventive. Okay, so there are various models, simulations, scenario building can be done. Okay, for example, if you say expiry, okay, product expiry, which customer, which wholesaler we are getting expiry, which products we are getting expiry, basis the trend, basis the period, volume, and all those stuff. We can evaluate whether basis my current sale, current upliftment, current secondary sales, whether I will get those expiries in future or not. And there are many such areas where we can try to predict. And before that event happens, we can do some corrective actions in terms of movement of those. So if we see that certain stocks are not being liquidated by some stockist, now we can act in advance by saying that we shift those stock to some other where it is where it is required. Okay, that's how we'll avoid those expiry, because eventually once it's expired, it will in the FMCG industry, in pharma industry, we have to accept the expiries, right? So there are various other, be it credit note, be it revenue, be it expense management. Okay, predictive analysis can be performed. Another area which we are again working is on the what do you say, AI ML, using artificial intelligence or a machine learning tool to give up more detailed insights, because even we see that now the controls have been fixed. Now there are various other emerging risks which are there. So we are trying to use these AI ML tool to do a maybe better analysis. Okay. So this is what, so I have divided my presentation into two parts. I forgot to mention at the beginning, as the slide which I have taken through. I have a demo to give on certain analytics which we have performed. Okay, which will give you the insights in terms of the capabilities and the power of the tool. Okay, I'll just upload this. So this is the demo. Is my screen up? Shubham?
Yes.
So within one area, which is discounted at business. So there are these many tests, more than around 20 tests, which are performed. Okay. These are trends. So which will give the overview, the trending of the business. These are outliers. Now these outliers which we get are then picked up for the audit. Now this is, as I mentioned, it is done on the entire population. So my sample selection becomes very strategic. Okay, whatever outliers I get over here are the sample for me to do the audit, detailed audit. These are clear-cut exceptions. These are clear-cut exceptions where you see duplicate claims, where you see multiple rates, approval after exit. So we have divided into 3 broad categories. And 4th category is the MIS presentation, where the team can use this tool to do their MIS presentation to the management. I'll deep dive in terms of couple of so if you see, this gives the, so these numbers, values, data, everything is masked. Nothing is actual. It is just for an example which we have put over here for you to see the power of this tool. So these are the customers, the number of products, counters, total sales, CN. These are, then there are trends in terms of sales, the credit notes, okay, various divisions within which these are there, customers, counters, products. So these are various data fields available, okay. And there are filters also available in the right column. If you have to filter a specific requirement, that can be done. If you click on one of the category like division, so my entire data gets updated. If you see my all the trends, everything will get changed. You can go in depth. So for example, if you have selected this division, then I select this customer. For this customer, what are the counters? What are the products? Within products also, I can, so there, this can be taken to the next level of detailing in terms of slicing and dicing and going in detail to the last mile of the transaction. Okay. So as I mentioned, these are these clear exceptions where there are duplicate claims. Now these claims, wherever the tool has identified in the entire population, these duplicate, someone will need to go and check the vouchers to see if those are really duplicate, and then necessary action in terms of the excess value of claim, the number of customers, the bills, and all those stuff will come over here. And in fact, the transaction details also will be there. So these 2 transactions, they see that this is duplicate basis, the customer invoice, the date, the product. Okay. So these are the transaction level detail will also be displayed. Only thing is, after this exception gets highlighted, one has to go to the vouchers to check if those are correct, and then necessary action has to be taken. Now, approval after the employee has exited. There may be situation where, be it claims, be it expenses, be it any raising of PO, PR, right? If the process of discontinuing or discontinuing the excess right gets delayed, people try to use this, be it through password sharing, access sharing. People, but then, or maybe even after exit, if it is available on web-based tools, people can access and make such claims. Okay, so this gives an exception. So I think so. Whatever I am trying to show over here is, we do these analysis while performing internal audit, right? Now we rely on Excel sheet analysis. We rely on samples. If we try to codify this in the tool, this can be performed. The analysis can be performed on a monthly basis on the entire data set. And this happens on the click of the button. Okay. One more initiative which we have done is now the entire the tool has been linked to our system, the ERP system, through a data warehouse, data lake. As a result, every month the entire data from the ERP will flow through the data lake to this tool on a set frequency, and on a click of a button, this gets updated. So now there is no manual intervention in terms of collating the data, uploading it in the system, and then so that even that has an effort, right? So we are trying to make it automated in a manner where there is a limited or a negligible manual intervention. So that's very important for everyone to think what beyond, how can we improvise, what next we can take it to the next level, what are the other available ideas in the market. So we should explore those and try to implement those. I'll show one more demo to you guys. This is from an expense side on export logistics, where there are the expenses in terms of the freight forwarder, CHA. So here, if you see, all the types of KPIs are there in terms of the total number of shipment, countries, carriers, customers, value of invoice, freight, entire which are part of the geographies in the entire world where the shipments are done, right? Is it through a sea mode of shipment, sea or air, country wise, invoice wise, freight expenses, carrier frequency, and all those stuff. So if I click on this, my entire layout will change and give me the output as per the my requirement. Okay, so for this, for Australia, for example, what is the split between air and air to sea, right? So I can use this in a dynamic ways. For example, North America, what is my breakup between mode of shipment? Okay, who are my carriers who are providing the service? So different sort of analysis can be done. So these are analysis in terms of destination port wise ratio. So which are the ports where I'm incurring high freight cost as compared to the invoice value. So these reds are typically exceptions where 40% of my invoice value is my freight cost. Now this becomes an opportunity for a user to go and check, can I reduce my rates? So lots of cost saving opportunities, efficiencies can be drawn from these tools. Now, and if I have to do this on a regular basis, it would manually, it will be really a task to do. I have to put a couple of team members, they'll spend a week or 10 days to give the output. By the time the output is come, it becomes irrelevant. Also, if I have to do from an audit perspective, also I'll be doing only on annual basis. By the time damage is already done, this becomes a real time a gap analysis or an exception analysis or an outlier, which one can get every month end, and the actions can be taken. And for us, this is developed along with the businesses, and they are using. It's not the tool. The tool is not used by auditors. It is used by the business for them to analyze gaps, so that when we go to do audit, we don't see these gaps. We work only on the remediation. We see if the remediation has been done on these gaps. So this becomes, so we are now thinking one step ahead, right? Annual basis, we'll go to audit, come out with the gap. Now that is not required, at least for the standard areas. The effort also, the audit team, the efforts can be placed on a different sort of risk, right? The emerging risk, right? Be it cybersecurity, be it the ESG risk, or many other business risk which one has to focus. So these standardized areas, the routine areas can be automated, and the effort can be given to the more specialized or more business related issues. Okay, so this is overall presentation from my side. I am done with my presentation. Happy to take questions along with the panel. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Over to you, Shubham.
Thank you, Amitji, for giving your wonderful insights on this subject, because like even I understood a lot of things, like key concerns which you highlighted, like revenue leakages, process inefficiency, the key risk indicators which you have highlighted in your report, and you have also shown the way how we use analytics to predict future outcomes based on historic data, and I would say that this session, which Prashant ji has started, wherein he has highlighted the way softwares can be used to perform our internal audit, and the way this is taken by VGVS sir, and he highlighted what things we have to consider while we are doing audit. So the way he has highlighted second line of a defense and risk management functions, the way enterprise risk should be considered before going to internal audit and before performing internal audit. And then when you take the floor by showing your analytics tool as well as the skills that we use to perform our audit, that really given a beautiful insight on this topic. So I seriously thank each one of you for this wonderful session. So let me take you to the Q&A session. If we can. So our first question would be from just give me a second. Okay, so one question is from V Subramani. He's asking, consequent to pandemic, can you explain with empirical example what are the problems faced by organization in providing remote access to employees working from home or other users, how this was overcome? So in the panelists, if you can take this question, VGVS, Prashant sir or Amit.
Yeah, so this was well planned. What has happened is that there was a two-way authentication. So if you have to access any of it's a single sign-on kind of an application, which means that once you sign on onto your HCL proprietary software, it would then provide access to various other applications that are connected. So it's a single sign-on. But so before that, you would definitely have to go through at least dual sign-in, which means that it has to have dual authentication. So one would be through your email, then of course you would have an OTP and also a confirmation through the phone. So that's how the authentications were actually provided. And because it's on a virtual network, obviously, once the gateway gives you the authentication or the approval, then it would provide you with the access. And then there was also this restriction which was actually built in, because what happens in the background, all the applications, they get updated within the laptop itself in terms of be it your DLP, be it your permitted software that you can actually download and use, and all of that will get automatically updated. So as part of your imaging, and then you have the web sensor and DLP built in. So you cannot either transfer, copy, or even take a picture of this, unless of course you do it with your phone. Otherwise, you can't take a phone either on your picture on your phone or take a printout. So those restrictions have been built in. and so which enabled you to actually work seamlessly. If you had access to SAP, obviously you had one more authentication to go through to access your SAP application. So we never had that problem. All the individuals were issued laptops, and the company also issued data cards wherever available. Or else, if the individuals had their own Wi-Fi, we, as per the policy, we were also permitted to get the reimbursements for the Wi-Fi. So yeah, that's how we managed.
So what, Shubham, what we did in our organization was that Microsoft Azure was used to develop a virtual platform or a virtual desktop, so that the controls which sir is mentioning in terms of the restriction on on emailing certain sending out certain things or copying on your own desktop. So in case there is a confidential data, you cannot copy it on your own desktop and it stays only on the server, because especially being a chartered accountant firm, we're dealing with a lot of confidential information. Or for example, if there is a listed company audit which is going on, you do not want the numbers or any risk of that numbers going out, because that is also key concern of a lot of clients. So virtual desktop was something that was very useful.
Okay, so thanks for your for the answer. So second question is from okay, V Subramani again. So he's asking, how do you prevent softwares developed for a client having potential for use by similar clients from being illegally unauthorized, removed by employees and sold privately for financial gain? I think VGBS sir should answer this question, because being in HCL, he may face this kind of a problem. No?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this is something that you cannot stop it, but then as a process, you cannot actually carry any of this or copy any of this either on a pen drive, or you can email it. The only way how you could do it is probably take a picture using your phones. It does happen. I tell you where the problem occurs, when you engage third-party resources, because it's not possible for you. Typically, as part of your service delivery, you use a lot of these third-party resources on contractual basis, especially in the Europe, US kind of geographies. And that's where you have the maximum challenges, because in case if you permit them to use their own personal laptops, then this risk comes up. But otherwise, as a practice, what happens is that any application development typically happens at the in-house facility. It doesn't happen at house. And secondly, you have these laptops are issued, company proprietary laptops are all issued to all the employees with all the requisite checks and balances. And then despite all of this, if there's a way how somebody can actually copy, it's a very tedious thing, because you have to take pictures or whatever. And then if you still attempt to do it, and if somebody complains, obviously then company takes recourse to takes legal recourse. So that's the way how it happens. But otherwise, you
So,
have all the
sir,
checks and
their question
balances.
was also with regard to the software that.
Yeah, see, one thing which happens, if you're talking of a license or software, for example, let's take Microsoft, it could be Outlook or any of these Microsoft products. See, what happens is that there's an audit which gets conducted, and we engage external agencies to actually run an audit. Because if you purchase the license for 1,000 people, they do an audit to see that whether which all laptops are actually using these 1,000 licenses, or whether 1,010 licenses users are using the licenses. So immediately they track and they trace. And then they make sure that they identify some of these the unauthorized ones, and they initiate appropriate action. So that's a periodic activity which happens. It's not something which happens on a real-time basis, but there is this process which has been built in place. See, because HCL as an organization purchases a lot of software worldwide, because some of the software are required to be downloaded or purchased for use for client products, for developing client products. So it becomes all the more important for us to track and monitor to make sure that the licensing software actually gets transferred as part of the licensing terms that we agree with the client and with the software OEM. So, yeah.
Thank you, sir. So our next question is for Amit, sir. The tools that you showed us is for the business, and the auditor can ask for reports of these tools for a particular time or date. Am I right? So this question was asked by Hemlata. Amitji,
So
you
what
are
is
on
the,
mute, I
sorry.
guess.
So we can give access of this tool to auditors as well. Okay. So even we have given access of few of the tools which they needed to the auditors for them to evaluate. So it's fine. I don't see any challenge in giving the
And their
output
ask
or
is
as well as.
whether there is this is the specialized tool or this is a standard one.
No, this is not a standard tool. Okay, this is a specialized where as a platform, as I mentioned, the IT strategy is important to use the platform which for development, the output platform, and the cloud which is required to store the data. Okay, so it is developed in by using technical teams. The knowledge is of internal audit team as well as business. So we use technical team to code, prepare the make the code. Okay, but the knowledge in terms of what needs to be tested, what exception we need, what outlier or what MIS needs is jointly done by business as well as audit team. So it's not an off the shelf tool. It's customized as per the requirement.
Thank you. And another question is from Nitin. So he wanted to learn using of AI, robotics, and machine learning from internal auditor perspective. So is there any available source from where he can or any other person can learn those skills from internal audit perspective only?
Yeah, one
No,
can. Sorry, go
Sorry,
ahead.
sorry.
please go on. Go ahead.
No, I think more or less, I am not, Amitji, I am not aware about a specialized course or something like that, but it is more of a self-learning, I think, which people have to do. That is what my take was on. That if you
Yes,
do it
Prashant,
and
I
work
agree.
experience is something that helps, and you use your general internal audit knowledge.
Yes. In my view, Shubham, if I have to do this, rather than internal audit, see, if the auditor is from an IT background, right? Auditor can be anyone. It's not that auditor has to be a chartered accountant. Okay. So if the auditor is from an IT background, he has developed some he has some technical expertise into these analytics or some AI ML, which that person can learn. Okay. For a chartered accountant to learn, it will be a task. In my view, we should use our resources knowledge to get the output and use a technical team who are capable of developing this to get the output rather than spending effort and time in learning something which is really technical. And let me tell you, AI ML is not an easy nut or easy thing to do. Okay, lots of efforts are required.
I'm sure VGVS sir has something to say. Sir, you
You're
are
on
on
mute.
mute.
I would echo what both the speakers earlier have said. See, I think we typically use the business knowledge or the audit knowledge. And in fact, I have used external SMEs to develop robotic process automation and for specific objectives. And you can also build an AI MI layer on it, which is nothing but coding. If somebody is interested in learning coding, then somebody can actually go ahead and indulge because it's nothing but coding. So and how do you it has specific what should I say a method of actually writing a code, and somebody who is interested in application development or coding can certainly go ahead and learn if he or she has the interest to learn that. Absolutely not a problem. But as Mr. Prashant and others have rightly said, it's a long drawn process. But just to achieve an audit objective, it's not mandatory or needed to learn coding. But then it's good to actually get it done to achieve a certain objective, audit objective or business objective. And typically what happens, I tell you, a lot of these applications or analytical applications that a lot of speakers have spoken about is used by the management for their performance. A CFO would definitely like to use a lot of these analytics. A procurement head would like to use a lot of these analytics for their own internal use. And I see it illogical that nobody within the business uses these analytics for running their business, but only auditor uses. It's very, very strange. Typically, as a practice, what happens is that the business actually invests, internal audit partners with them, because in terms of checks and balances, and if there's any specific requirements or accesses, that internal auditor requires. I think that because most of this data and information is sensitive, so internal auditor typically partners with the management in terms of who should have access, when should that access be granted and revoked, because nobody would like to have permanent access to payroll information data, financial information data, your vendor list, or your customer information, or your contract repository, the sales order repository, all of that, because of the sensitivity. So how would those accesses be granted? Who would have those accesses, and what information would be downloaded? All of that is what is discussed. But otherwise, by and large, it is the business which actually invests in developing the analytical tools for running the business.
So I guess we don't have enough questions now. I would request Jitendra sir or the panelist, if you have some closing remarks, or else we can conclude this call.
No, I think these are exciting times for auditors, because the times are changing. I have seen how the internal audit function per se has undergone a significant change during the last 33, 34 years of my existence, having done nothing but fraud risk assessments, or process reviews, or process reengineering, whatever you call it, governance related. It could be developing framework, or how you actually conduct an audit in an automated or in a digitized environment. Yeah, I think there are significant changes. Even if it is in document form today, you can convert them into a digital form and still conduct an audit. But I think there's only one word of caution that I would like to give to all the auditors, because I see a lot of overemphasis on the so-called analytics and digitization. I'll tell you this with a rider. I would give a simile with that of a medical practitioner. You go to your doctor and you say that you have an ailment. He recommends certain diagnostic tests. Now, the diagnostic tests in itself doesn't mean that he gives you a medicine, right? They only tell you the health of the individual who went to him for a remedy. Similarly, when you perform a diagnostic test, whether it is on 100% of the sample or whether it is a selected sample, what is more important is that whether that sample represents the overall population, irrespective of the fact what kind of a sampling methodology that you might want to adopt. Sampling itself is a subject in itself, which takes about half a day. In what situations, what kind of sampling that you should do. Typically, it's like, poll prediction kind of a thing, right? So you have to actually follow a scientific method by which you identify a particular sampling method, irrespective of the fact whether you perform that on 100% or on a limited number. What is more important is that the results of the analytics will tell you the health of a particular process. If you find exceptions, one of the things as an auditor that you need to assess is that whether these exceptions are systemic deficiencies or whether these are isolated aberrations. Is something that an auditor will have to use his judgment very cautiously, because you might end up actually extrapolating it, and then might scare away the audit committee or even the management. One of the things that you might want to look at is that whether out of 100 transactions, 2 transactions might have failed, right? But are they isolated, or is it indicating something else? What is it indicating? Is something, because if you want to perform more detailed tests, you might want to draw more samples based on that assessment. What is more important is the focus on the process, because the process should be able to take care of your transaction, right? So any analytics will only tell you the health of the process. And I think somebody will have to delve into the process to see that why has those exceptions occurred, and whether they are systemic, whether they are isolated. Both are equally important. If they're isolated, then bulk of the process is fine. Then you need to understand as
I think sir screen has got freezed.
Yeah, I actually there may be some network issues. So Prashant sir, you have any valuable feedback before concluding this particular call?
No, nothing. I think
Amit?
VGVS sir was, I think, mentioning a very relevant point in terms of overblowing the point or making a balance out of this. I think that is very much relevant to all the people who are in the audit profession, I think. And I think his screen is, he's back. Sir, you were completing something.
VGVS sir?
No, he's not able to hear.
Okay. Yes. Yes, Prashant.
No, I think otherwise, I think it was, this is a very relevant subject which has been picked up. And I think hope the audience would have enjoyed it, because I think it's dinner time to now stretch beyond.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say the viewers are also huge in number. So it's really great that we have this session, and really insightful. All the three areas were covered so well that people would have enjoyed. Especially if I talk about myself, I literally enjoyed this session. So thank you, Charanjit sir, for inviting us in this session. Thank you, Amit ji, Prashant ji, VGVS ji, for joining this session. Thank you, Jitender ji, for for hosting this session as chairman of Amritsar branch of NIRC. Thanks all participants and faculty members. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Have a
Bye.
good day.
Thank you.